Before we begin, take a slow breath and imagine a quiet path leading into a forgotten story. Tonight, we're stepping into the life of a soul divided half demon, half man. Long before he was known as Upper Rank 3. Once he was simply Hakuji, a boy who wanted nothing more than to protect the small, fragile things he loved. So let your mind loosen, soften, and drift with me into the shadows of his memory. If you enjoy these journeys, please like, share, and subscribe. Tell me where you're listening from, what time it is, and the topics you'd love to explore. Your thoughts may guide our next adventure. Before we move deeper into Akaza's journey, let me open a quiet window into the world he once walked through. A world suspended between breath and shadow, between swordlight and trembling fear. A world shaped not only by demons and humans, but by the fragile threads of memory that hold them together, and the grief that pulls them apart. In the late Meiji era of Japan, life rested on a delicate balance. Lanterns flickered on wooden streets, carrying the warmth of ordinary evenings, children chasing fireflies, merchants calling into the night. But just beyond the edge of the lamplight, another reality lived and breathed, a second layer of existence, hidden from most, yet intimately close. This was the boundary where humans and demons coexisted without ever truly meeting, until fate forced them to. Demons in this world were not creatures of pure myth. They were born from Muzan's blood, the most ancient and dangerous entity to ever walk the land. His essence could twist a dying human into something new, a being that healed faster than wounds could form, that never aged, never slept, never stopped hungering. But these gifts carried a cruel price. To grow stronger, they had to consume human flesh. To survive daylight, they had to drown themselves in darkness. And with every life they devoured, a little more of their own memories sank into a silent abyss. This is the world Akaza stepped into, a world where strength ruled every corner of the night. At the center of it all stood Muzan Kibutsuji, calm, cold, and impossibly distant. He was not merely a king in the shadows, he was the architect of despair, dictating the rules of existence with a philosophy as sharp as a blade. The strong live, the weak disappear. Under Muzan's rule, demons were encouraged to abandon compassion and cling to instinct. Their humanity, their regrets, their softness, everything was meant to be silenced. Even memories of the people they once loved were treated like burdens to be erased. But Akaza was different. Deep inside him, beneath layers of rage and power, something resisted that erasure, a fragment of longing, a faint ache that refused to die. He wanted strength, but not for dominance, not for cruelty. In his earliest days, before the blood of Muzan reshaped him, strength was something he used to protect, not destroy. That contradiction between the demon he became and the human he once was formed the quiet center of his tragedy. And maybe that sips why his story lingers with us. Akaza's life is not only the tale of a demon, it is an echo of something painfully human. It speaks of people shaped by their past, carved by loss, driven by the fear of losing again. His overwhelming strength is not a blessing, it is the echo of a heart that never learned how to let go. So as you listen tonight, let yourself drift between these two worlds, the soft lantern glow of humanity and the endless darkness of the demons who hunt it. Akaza stands between them like a fractured mirror, reflecting both sorrow and brutality, both memory and oblivion. And in that reflection, we begin to understand not just the world he lives in, but the storm that lives inside him. Before Akaza became a name whispered in fear, there was a boy named Hakuji walking through the narrow, tired streets of Edo. If you look closely, slowly, the way one watches dust drifting in morning light, you can still sense the world that shaped him. A world stitched together from hunger, cold air, and the faintest threads of hope. Edo, in those days, was not the lively picture painted in stories, not for children like Hakuji. The rooftops were chipped, their tiles broken like missing teeth. Wooden walls, once sturdy, had grown brittle under years of rain and sun, peeling away layer by layer until they resembled old scars. The alleys were so narrow that two people passing each other had to turn sideways, and the ground beneath them squelched with mud, scraps of discarded vegetables, and yesterday's misfortune. This was a place where survival was not an act, it was a rhythm. Every morning, long before the sun warmed the rooftops, laborers dozed off against worn stone edges, their bodies curled around their exhaustion. The little ones, kids who should have been playing, picked through market leftovers, searching for anything edible, a bruised fruit, a forgotten dumpling, sometimes even a bone with a hint of flavor left on it. In this world, hunger wasn't something you felt, it was something you carried. Above all of this hung a sky, the color of dull metal, never quite day, never quite night. The wind that threaded through the cracks of homes was cold and sharp, slipping through every opening, as if it belonged there. At night, the only sound breaking the silence was the distant call of vendors pushing their small carts, their voices stretching thin across the empty streets. The air echoed with fatigue more than movement. Inside a cramped house, on one of those forgotten streets, lay Hakuji's father. The room was small enough that you could cross it in 3 slow steps. Light struggled to find its way inside, slipping only through a few broken slats in the wall. The smell was a mixture of damp wood, cheap medicine, and the faint metallic scent of illness, a scent that clung to the bedding, the walls, and the boy who sat beside his father every night. The blanket covering the old man was thin and cold to the touch, but Hakuji pulled it up anyway, as if the gesture alone could warm him. And yet, amid all this bleakness, one place offered him something gentler. Keisho's dojo stood at the edge of those weary streets, like a small lantern in a long corridor. The training yard was lined with crisp gravel that crunched softly under every step. The sliding wooden doors creaked each time they opened, but it wasn't an unpleasant sound. It felt familiar, like a greeting. The air inside carried the scent of cedar, sweat, and warm tea, an aroma of discipline woven with kindness. In one quiet room, Koyuki sat by the window, playing soft melodies on her instrument, her presence turning the fading light golden. This was the Edo that raised Hakuji, harsh enough to break him, yet gentle enough to show him what he wished to protect. And it is here, in these dim corners and fragile breaths, that the seeds of his tragedy were planted. When Hakuji's human heart finally shattered, and Muzen's blood rewrote the last pieces of him, the world itself began to change. Or perhaps, more precisely, the way he perceived the world changed, subtly at first, then overwhelmingly, until the boundary between reality and illusion dissolved into a single shifting canvas. For a demon like Akaza, the physical world no longer behaved in fixed lines or clear shapes. Objects blurred at the edges, as if refusing to stay still. Distances stretched and tightened, unpredictably, responding not to the laws of nature, but to the turbulence of his emotions. Walls, trees, and paths seemed to pulse with invisible tension, sometimes swelling forward, sometimes bending away, breathing in rhythm with his instincts. And his senses, those changed most of all. Smells sharpened into vivid signals. A drop of blood in the snow became a bright flare in the darkness, blooming like ink in water. The faintest breath inhaled miles away rolled toward him as a shifting ribbon of scent. He could trace the flow of an opponent's life force, their fear, their confidence, their weakness, as if it were smoke curling in the wind. To Akaza, these traces weren't abstract notions. They were living shapes, drifting and expanding before his eyes. Every creature, every human, every demon radiated what he could only describe as pressure. Not physical force, but something deeper, an aura, a weight, a gravitational pull of strength or fragility. Around the strong, the air throbbed like a heartbeat. Around the weak, it flickered faintly, fragile as candlelight. And so Akaza stopped seeing the world the way ordinary eyes do. He no longer cared for textures, colors, or forms. He perceived intensity. He saw strength before he saw bodies. He saw potential before he saw faces. This shift turned every battlefield into a strange spiritual topography, an ever-changing map of glowing currents and dim shadows. The world became an ocean of auras rising and falling, brightening and fading, like the tide of power itself. Akaza walked through this ocean, as if through mist, guided not by sight, but by instinct. The environment bent according to his inner storms. When anger surged through him, the world reddened, contracting like a tightening fist. Trees leaned inward, shadows elongated, and sound seemed to sharpen into thin, cutting lines. But when excitement stirred, when he sensed a worthy opponent, the entire landscape slowed, time stretched, movements elongated as though painted in water. Every step, every shift of muscle, every flicker of energy felt suspended in amber, waiting for him to slice through it. Yet, within all these heightened senses, an odd loneliness lived. Even in a crowded forest, surrounded by rustling leaves and countless creatures, Akaza felt as though he stood in an endless void. People, buildings, mountains, all faded into a distant haze, as if they were merely scenery. Only one thing ever remained clear: the opponent standing before him. For a demon who could sense every life, he understood none of it. The physical world became faint, blurred, dissolving at the edges, while the world of strength, aura, and combat crystallized with painful clarity. In this strange in-between space, Akaza existed in a realm that was not fully real, not entirely imagined, but something else altogether. A quiet, terrifying architecture built from instinct, memory, and the echo of a heart he no longer remembered how to feel. When Akaza steps onto a battlefield, the world folds itself into a single breathless moment. It no longer resembles the streets he once walked, or the forests he sometimes passes through. Instead, the landscape dissolves into a private realm, a sealed space where only combat exists, sculpted entirely by instinct, will, and the quiet violence of motion. In that first heartbeat before the clash, something strange happens. The sounds of the world slip away. Wind softens into a distant hum. Dust, leaves, and moonlight lose their edges, blurring into the backdrop like brushstrokes washed with water. Even the cries of distant birds or the rustling of branches fade until the air feels weightless, suspended, waiting for him. This silence is not peaceful. It is focused, almost sacred. Within this pocket of stillness, the battlefield bends. The ground seems to shift beneath Akaza's feet, expanding or shrinking with the rhythm of his own speed. One moment, the distance between him and his opponent stretches like a long corridor. The next, it closes as if space contracts around his will. Every movement he makes leaves behind the faint impression of torn air, the sensation of space itself being sliced open and stitched back together in the span of an instant. To Akaza, nothing in these moments is abstract. He does not think of techniques or strategies. He does not see the scenery. He sees motion. He hears heartbeat. He feels the tremor in the ground before a punch meets flesh. And at the center of it all is the rhythm, his own pulse pounding through muscle and bone like a ceremonial drum calling him to battle. In this realm, there are only two presences that matter: himself, and the opponent before him. Everything else, mountains, trees, stars, the memories of a girl smiling behind shoji screens, fades into a distant fog. Koyuki does not exist here. Geisho does not exist here. Even Hakuji, the boy he once was, disappears into the echoing dark. Only the fight remains, bright and sharp as a blade. For Akaza, this is the closest he ever comes to living. Conflict becomes a kind of oxygen, a place where he does not have to feel the weight of forgotten pain or the quiet grief buried beneath Muzan's blood. In these suspended seconds, his mind clears, his spirit burns, his body moves without hesitation. And for the briefest moment, he becomes whole. Yet every battle is also a loop, a circle that returns him to the same emptiness. Each time he defeats a strong opponent, there is a flicker, an almost memory, something that aches faintly in his chest, a hint of longing for something he cannot name. Then it fades, and the silence returns. That is the quiet tragedy of Akaza Sit's battlefield. It is not a place where he finds himself. It is a place where he searches for himself again and again, only to emerge with nothing but the hollow echo of victory. In the end, every battle is a step in a circle he cannot break, a dance without a destination, a flame that burns but never warms. To understand Akaza's darkness, we must first linger gently in the quiet corners of his past, those fragile human moments that shaped him long before he tasted Muzan's blood. Every demon begins as a person, and for Hakuji, the boy he once was, humanity came woven from hardship, kindness, and a love too delicate to last. Hakuji's childhood rested on the edge of survival. He grew up in a house that barely kept out the rain, its wooden beams swollen with rot, its roof punctured by years of weather. Inside, his father lay sick, too weak to stand, too poor to buy medicine that could save his life. And so, the boy did the only thing he could think to do. He stole. Not out of cruelty, not out of mischief, but out of a desperate, trembling hope to prolong the one bond he still had. The world punished him for it. Each arrest left deeper bruises. Each beating etched another memory into his body. The tattoo branded into his flesh marked him as a criminal, a stain society refused to wash away. In those years, Hakuji Set's heart split into two layers, one hardened by street violence, and one softened by the aching desire to protect someone he loved. It was this duality, gentleness trapped inside brutality, that would follow him forever. And then, just as life seemed determined to crush him entirely, a single hand reached into the shadows. Keisho, a dojo master with stern eyes and a quiet, unshakable compassion. He found Hakuji, half-conscious, beaten and adrift, and instead of turning him over to the authorities, or worse, he lifted the boy out of the mud and brought him home. Geisha saw through the scars, through the reputation, through the rumbling anger that had wrapped itself around Hakuji's heart. What he found beneath all of that was a child who had never been taught how to be cared for. Under Keizo's roof, Hakuji learned discipline, not as punishment, but as structure. He learned strength, not as a weapon, but as a promise. And for the first time, he heard the words that would define his human life. Strength exists to protect others. From Keizo, he received something more precious than skill. He received direction, an anchor strong enough to steady the storm inside him. Keizo became the father Hakuji wished he'd always had. And then there was Koyuki, soft-spoken, gentle, and frail. She was the quiet glow in that modest dojo. Her voice, her music, her smile, each one reached places in Hakuji that even Keizo couldn't touch. With her he felt warmth, belonging, a glimpse of a future where he wasn't defined by crime or survival, but by love. She was the fragile light he never knew he needed, and the one he could never keep. Her death, and Queso's, did more than break him. It hollowed him. It shattered every lesson he had learned, ripping apart the foundation of the person he was trying to become. And in that void, Muzan found him. Before Akaza emerged, there was a boy shaped by love and crushed by fate. A boy who wanted to protect and lost everything worth protecting. After losing everything he cherished, Ikuji Sepp's final step into darkness came not from choice, but from collapse. And Muzan Kibutsuji was waiting. From the moment Muzan's blood seeped into his veins, the human world slipped away, and he was drawn into an entirely different structure, one built on power, hierarchy, and the cold mathematics of survival. To understand the place Akaza would soon occupy, we must look at the architecture of the demon realm itself, a world silently ruled from the shadows. At its peak sits Muzan, ancient and inscrutable. He is not simply a demon king, but the origin of all demons, the source of their immortality, their hunger, and their curse. Under his gaze, the concept of family dissolves. Demons are not children, allies, or followers. They are tools, pieces, extensions of his will. Those who fail him do not fall, they are erased. Below Muzan are the upper moons, the elite pillars of his power. Each one is a warrior, shaped by centuries of combat, their bodies honed by relentless killing and by the vast quantities of Muzan's blood they've absorbed. To reach these ranks is not a matter of loyalty, but of dominance. Only those with extraordinary talent, iron resolve, and monstrous adaptability can survive the transformation. Even fewer thrive. Akaza rose among them with frightening speed. To become an upper moon, a demon is measured by three qualities. Durability of the body. Their regeneration must be immediate, instinctive, and near limitless. Limbs, organs, even entire halves of the torso must reform faster than death can occur. Combat technique and instinct. This is where Akaza excelled. His martial skill from his human life, fused with demonic strength to create a fighter of unmatched clarity and precision. His every punch carried purpose. His every movement carried philosophy. Compatibility with Muzan Sepp's blood. The more a demon can withstand, the more Muzan will grant them. Akaza's body embraced the transformation instead of breaking beneath it. This alone placed him firmly among the strongest. And yet, beneath his terrifying prowess, something strange lingered. Akaza refused to eat women. He never explained why, but somewhere deep beneath the layers of rage and instinct, a fragment of Koyuki lived. Her presence softened a part of him the demon world could not fully erase. Muzan found this weakness curious, but tolerable, because Akaza compensated with overwhelming strength. In the demon hierarchy, Akaza was both prized and pitied. He was Muzan's favored weapon, a force released into the world to annihilate anyone whose strength dared to shine. But for Akaza, each battle was more than conquest. It was an instinctive search for something, a feeling he could never name, a silence he longed to break, a void he couldn't set fill. The stronger he became, the more he lost. With every victory, another memory sank deeper beneath the surface of his mind. The warmth of Keisho Sepp's guidance, the tenderness of Koyuki Sepp's smile, all of it gradually disappeared into the dark, a price demanded by the blood that kept him alive. And so the demon system did not merely give Akaza power, it consumed the man he once was, leaving behind a warrior shaped by strength, but hollowed by forgotten sorrow. Where there are demons, there must also be those who stand against them. In the world Akaza inhabits, the Demon Slayer Corps is not merely an organization, it is the counterweight to the darkness Muzan spreads. a force not of monstrous strength, but of unyielding resolve. Their presence forms the sharp, steady line that divides destruction from protection, despair from hope. Unlike demons, who thrive on instinct and power, demon slayers fight for something far quieter, something easily overlooked, yet infinitely stronger: the will to protect. Their philosophy is built on 3 pillars. First, every human life has value, whether weak or strong. Second, strength is a tool, not a purpose. And third, memory, love, suffering, lineage is worth carrying, no matter how heavy it becomes. These ideals stand in direct opposition to Akaza's worldview. To him, strength is the only thing that gives life meaning. The weak deserve to vanish, the strong earn the right to exist. But demon slayers do not see life through that lens. They believe that even the frailest breath has a place in the world. Their swords are not instruments of dominance, they are promises. Promises to stand between humanity and oblivion. This difference creates a tension far deeper than simple good versus evil. When Akaza faces demon slayers, he is not merely confronting warriors, he is confronting a philosophy that contradicts his very existence. For them, memory is a source of strength, the recollection of loved ones, the weight of duty, the warmth of a family they wish to protect. For Akaza, memory is unbearable. It is the door back to pain, the grief he buried, the broken promise he failed to keep, the faces he lost because fate was cruel. Where they hold memory close, he pushes it away. Where they embrace their past, he tries to erase his. And this clash between preservation and erasure, meaning and emptiness, reaches its purest expression in the battle between Akaza and Kyojuro Rengoku. Rengoku, the flame Hashira, stood like a pillar of light in the night. His fire did not burn to destroy, it burned to illuminate, to guide, to shield. Every move he made radiated purpose. Every strike carried warmth, conviction, and humanity. Akaza, in contrast, embodied the cold void left behind when all meaning is lost. His strikes were flawless, powerful, precise, but hollow. He fought not out of love or purpose, but out of an instinctual compulsion to seek strength. Where Rengoku's flames sang of life, Akaza's fists echoed with silence. Their battle was more than martial skill. It was the collision of 2 worldviews, light meeting shadow, hope meeting despair. In each exchange, Rengoku reminded the world why humans fight. In each counter, Akaza revealed the depth of what he had lost. And in the quiet aftermath, when the battlefield settled and the dust fell, Akaza felt something strange, an ache in his chest, a tremor in his soul. It was the first whisper of regret he had felt in centuries. But like every memory that threatened to surface, he forced it back into the darkness. Because for Akaza, fighting a demon slayer was never just a battle. It was a reminder of the person he used to be, and the person he could no longer bear to remember. When I step deeper into the architecture of this world, I often remind myself that demons in Kimetsu no Yaiba are not creatures of chaos, they are creatures of rules. Silent, absolute rules. The kind that do not care who obeys them, only that they are obeyed. Akaza lives within these laws, even when he no longer remembers how he arrived there. The first law is simple, yet cruel in its elegance. A demon does not die. Not by blade alone, not by wounds that would scatter a human body into dust. Their cells knit themselves together with impossible clarity, pulling torn flesh back into shape, sealing deep gashes in mere moments. They can be torn apart, skewered, crushed, and still rise. Only 2 forces break this immortality. The sun, which burns away the blood. Muzan has gifted them, and Nichiren blades, forged to carry the light demons, cannot endure. This weakness forms the fragile balance between hunter and hunted, day and night, memory and oblivion. But immortality is not a blessing, it is a hunger wearing the mask of eternity. The second law is the law of evolution. A law carved into every cell of a demon's body, written by Muzan himself. A demon must grow stronger, not out of desire, not out of pride, but because their body demands it the way lungs demand air. Each battle, each struggle, each drop of blood devoured, pushes them into new thresholds of strength. Muscles thicken, senses sharpen, reflexes coil into something animalistic and elegant. Akaza is the living embodiment of this law, his fists shaped by decades of hardship as a human and centuries of honed instinct as a demon. Combat is not a skill to him, it is a biological necessity. His entire existence has been re-engineered to seek challenge, to devour growth, to evolve without end. Yet the third law is the most haunting, the fading of memory. Every demon begins as a human, but the world they came from dissolves with every life they take. Names fade, faces blur. The warmth of human emotion thins until it is little more than a phantom sensation, something they feel only when the mind is quiet enough for pain to seep through. For most demons, this erosion is complete. But Akaza, he is not most. Somewhere in that shifting fog of instinct and violence, a fragment remains, a sliver of purpose he cannot trace, a feeling, tender, unbearable, that rises whenever he confronts someone who stands their ground not out of bloodlust, but out of conviction. He remembers nothing clearly, but he aches, and in that ache, the laws tremble. Demons are governed by survival, strength, and forgetting. Akaza is governed by all three, and by the lingering echo of a life he cannot entirely escape. There is a quiet torment that follows Akaza, one that does not come from battle, but from memory. Not the kind of memory that rises clearly like a lantern in the dark, but a faint ember, flickering in places he cannot name. Every time he steps into a fight with someone truly strong, those embers glow and the loop begins again. It always starts the same way. A worthy opponent appears, radiating conviction, discipline, or a strength born not from cruelty, but from purpose. And in that instant, something inside Akaza stirs. He does not remember Keiso's words, not consciously. He does not recall the warmth of a dojo or the fragrance of tea drifting through late afternoons. He does not recall Kyuki sitting by the window, smiling softly as the wind brushed past her hair. But echoes move through him, a posture, a tone of voice, the way an enemy steadies their breath before striking. These tiny fragments ignite a sensation he cannot understand, a tenderness that feels like pain, a recognition that feels like loss. And then the second phase begins, the spiral of battle and destruction. Akaza hurls himself into combat with a hunger sharpened by centuries of instinct. The stronger the opponent, the brighter the ember burns. The brighter it burns, the harder he fights. He moves with a violence so precise, it almost resembles grief, as if tearing through the air could tear through whatever shadows blur his past. Each strike carries not just power, but a silent plea, to feel whole again, to understand the emptiness inside him, to fill the void with something unbreakable. But as he overwhelms his opponent, another feeling creeps in, a tremor, a hesitation so small it barely touches the edge of conscious thought. It is not doubt, it is sorrow. And when the opponent falls, when the light in their eyes dims and the world grows quiet once more, a strange emptiness washes over him, a hollow ache, like reaching for someone in a dream who disappears the moment you touch them. This is the moment of regret, the fragment of humanity still trapped deep within him, a whisper of loss he cannot name, a sense that he has destroyed something precious, something familiar, without knowing why. But the feeling lasts only a moment, because the final phase of the loop always arrives. Forgetfulness, his greatest shield and his greatest curse. The mind of a demon protects itself not with strength, but with erasure. Akaza feels the ache swell, threatening to drag old memories to the surface, memories of warmth, purpose, love. So his mind forces them back down, buried beneath instinct, buried beneath bloodlust, buried beneath the words Muzan carved into his soul. The regret fades, the ache quiets, the ember dims, and the loop resets. It will reset again and again, until the day the fragments finally rise too quickly to bury. The day the boy he once was steps forward, and the demon he became can no longer look away. That day will break the loop, but like all tragedies, only at the moment he breaks as well. Inside Akaza, there is a war that never ends. A silent conflict fought not with fists or claws, but with memory and instinct between the demon he became and the man he once was. This division shapes everything he does. It pulls him forward, tears him back, and binds him to a fate he can neither understand nor escape. On one side stands Akaza the demon, sculpted by Muzan's blood and sharpened by centuries of battle. This self worships strength above all else. To Akaza, power is the only truth that has survived the erosion of time. The weak, he believes, have no place in the world. They vanish, as all fragile things do. In his demon mind, fighting is not a means, it is an identity. It is the only moment when the emptiness inside him stills, when instinct aligns perfectly with action, when he feels, if only for a heartbeat, that he is alive. This part of him is cold, relentless, absolute. It is the fragment Muzan, nurtured, fed, and forged into a weapon. But beneath that sharpened shell lies Hakuji, the buried half, the human heart he tries, unsuccessfully, to forget. Hakuji believed in protection, not destruction. He learned discipline at Keisho's side, learned tenderness in Koyuki's quiet smile. To him, strength existed not to dominate, but to guard the weak. Family was a place to return to, a home shaped not by walls, but by care. These ideals did not disappear when he became a demon. They sank. They dissolved, yes, but did not die. And every time he faces someone who holds these values, someone brave, compassionate, unyielding, they stir like ghosts inside him. This internal collision reveals itself most clearly in battles like the one against Rengoku. To Akaza's demon half, Rengoku was a shining beacon that needed to be extinguished. A warrior, strong, noble, fearless, everything a worthy opponent should be. But to Hakuji, buried deep beneath centuries of silence, Rengoku was something else entirely. He was a reminder, a reflection of Keiza Sepp's belief in discipline, a reflection of Koyuki Sepp's warmth, a mirror of the person Hakuji once wished to become. And so the two selves clash. The demon pushes forward with wild intensity, driven by instinct and the hunger for a challenge. The human pulls back, shaken by emotions he cannot name. The result is a frenzy, a storm of attacks, fueled not just by power, but by confusion, ache, and longing. Akaza fights harder because he is fighting against himself, and it hurts. Not physically, demons do not feel pain that way. It hurts in the center of his chest, in a place so deeply buried he almost believes it is empty. In his final battle, that buried self finally rises. The weight of memory breaks through the walls he spent centuries constructing. At last, Hyugi and Akaza face each other inside the quiet of his soul, the human and the demon, the protector and the destroyer, the past and the present. And in that meeting, the loop ends. Not with triumph, but with surrender, with the choice to stop running from the pain and let it lead him home. It is the moment where a demon chooses peace, because a human inside him finally remembers how to feel. Before we move any further, I want you to settle into a comfortable stillness. Wherever you are, lying down, curled beneath a blanket, or resting against the quiet of your room, let the world around you soften. And now, inhale gently. As you breathe in, imagine yourself stepping through the wooden gate of an old dojo. The wood is weathered, its grain worn smooth by countless hands, yet it welcomes you with the warmth of something remembered. The air is cool, touched by a distant breeze, and that breeze carries an echo, faint, fragile, of a boy who once walked this path with quiet hope in his heart. Hold that breath for a moment. Feel the space around you expand, as if time itself is slowing to match the rhythm of your lungs. In this pause, the world becomes translucent. You can hear distant echoes, the soft thud of bare feet against training mats, the steady swing of a wooden staff cutting through the air, the quiet gasp of effort, followed by gentle laughter, the laughter of a girl whose presence once brought peace to a troubled soul. Let the memory drift closer, not as something sharp or painful, but as a ripple across still water. You are not reliving a moment. You are observing it tenderly, as if watching the memory of someone who never learned how to rest. Now, exhale. Let the air fall out of you like a long, heavy sigh, the kind that releases tension from places you didn't know were holding it. As you breathe out, imagine the dojo dissolving into twilight. The walls fade first, turning into thin strands of light. Then the floor beneath you softens, becoming mist, becoming darkness, becoming the quiet space where Akaza himself stands, between what he remembers and what he cannot bear to recall. He is there, somewhere in the distance, a silhouette carved from sorrow and strength, not threatening, not violent, just still, suspended between memory and oblivion. In this meditative dark, try to sense what he feels. A pull backward toward warmth, discipline, belonging, and a push forward toward instinct, survival, the endless search for meaning in the clash of fists and the roar of battle. His heart beats in two different rhythms, and neither one has ever let him rest. Inhale again slowly. Imagine the faint scent of cedar wood returning, the rustle of a kimono sleeve, a soft voice humming somewhere out of reach. These are the pieces of him that survived, even when he could not remember why. Hold the breath. Let those pieces float inside you like drifting lanterns, quiet, warm, untouchable. And now exhale. Release everything. Let the dojo slip away. Let the echoes fade. Let the boy and the demon stand together in silence, neither dominating the other, just coexisting, gently, in the dim space where memory meets dreaming. As the breath leaves you, allow yourself to rest in that same space, a place between remembering and forgetting, a place where even the restless spirit of Akaza pauses, and finally, for a moment, simply breathes. Akaza was never born to be a demon. He was a human being stripped of the place he longed to return to. Sometimes, the most terrifying monsters are nothing more than wounds that never had the chance to heal. Thank you for staying with me through the story of a soul torn in two. And if tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, you glimpse a lone figure standing quietly beneath falling snow, don't be afraid. It is only someone still searching for the path back to himself.